Good morning and welcome again to Travels with Monkey Boy. We are just about finished with our Irish tour. So here we go. Dublin days. Like Limerick, Ptolemy, oh, come on, read a book, wrote about Dublin. So 2,000 years ago, this coastal city was inhabited by Celts and known enough in the broader world for the Greeks to write about them. Then, just like Limerick, in the ninth century, the Vikings came in and destroyed the settlement, killed everyone, and set up their own city and called it Dublin. And like Limerick, they controlled the area for hundreds of years in order to pillage the surrounding countryside. Oh, those wacky Vikings. Henry II of England came over in the 12th century and eradicated the Viking problem while simultaneously creating the millennial long English problem. At the time, Henry II set up fortifications outside Dublin consisting of rows of large pointed logs, palisades in French, pale in English. That is where the phrase beyond the pale, meaning offensive or unacceptable, comes from. You had Ireland that was within English control, and then Ireland beyond the pale, the offensive Irish. My mom always said there are two kinds of Irish, the lace curtain Irish and the horse thieves. And our descendants came from the horse thieving side. Anyway, we had the car, but had no intention of going beyond the pale anymore. It was just Thursday and Friday we had the city, and with Lizzie having classes and Danielle and Lizzie having a need to shop, not a lot of adventuring. Still, we found things to do. On Thursday, we started the day at the Guinness Brewery Tour. Now, I've been on brewery tours in Wisconsin, Pabst and Miller back in college. So I wasn't really that excited, but I was intrigued by it as Guinness is a thing. Top 10 selling beer in the world still today, despite it being a bitter stout. At one point, it was the most popular beer in the world. It started brewing when US were just colonies. Arthur Guinness signed a 9,000 year lease. Yes, 9,000 years. All the land was crown land, so you couldn't own it, just lease it. The Guinness family became the richest people in Ireland and eventually became English earls. The Brits just hand these things out, I guess. In the 1930s, Guinness had its own railroad, its own ships, and 5,000 people working in the brewery in Dublin. I've had Guinness back in my college days and thought it was kind of disgusting. But man, this tour was amazing. Guinness is made with just four ingredients. Yeast. Yeast is a domesticated microorganism for your edification. Guinness has been using the same microorganism that they created for their beer since 1903. They grow it when needed and keep strains of it cryogenically frozen and revive it when they need a new batch. Malt, second ingredient, which is all grown in Ireland, dating back hundreds of years for some of the farms. The water from the same source for 250 years, the Liffey River, which flows from the Wicklow Mountains into Dublin, and hops, mostly from the US. They get the chocolate color from the brewing process, which has remained the same for hundreds of years. I really respect history and craftsmanship, so I was thoroughly impressed with Guinness. Then they take you through their famous marketing. Yes, Guinness Book of World Records came from the same company to help them promote the beer. They have on display a great ad from the 1950s when advertising was not so regulated. Oh, who am I kidding? It's pretty much the same as today's. And they claimed Guinness is one of the most nourishing beverages, richer in carbohydrates than a glass of milk. Another claim was that Guinness is a valuable natural aid in cases of insomnia. And I can vouch for that. Enough Guinness, and you find yourself face down, sound asleep. God bless advertisers. At the end of the long tour, we got a full pint of Guinness to drink, and sitting in the rooftop beer garden on a beautiful sunlit day with a panoramic view of the city, I hoisted my glass of history that I now knew so well and about how I remembered it. After 3 sips, the girls said they'd had enough and wanted to go shopping. So fortunately for me, there was a museum very close to the girls' shopping mall, so I spent a blissful few hours wandering around the National Museum of Archaeology. I typically don't geek out over archaeology. I'm interested in how people lived a few thousand years ago, but only so many arrowheads and pottery shards one man could stare at. Fortunately, this museum featured Europe's largest Neolithic gold collection. I guess there's gold in Ireland, and they've had goldsmiths working it since the Iron Age. That plus a 100-year vision for the museum had the curators buying other countries' ancient gold, and it was an impressive collection. I also spent a long time in the bog bodies exhibit. If you remember from a few days ago, peat bogs are a kind of swamp that is common in Ireland. Peat bogs are also great at preserving dead things because of their thick organic material, which doesn't allow air to get to whatever is dumped in the bog. Because of that, and because the Celtic kings like to have commoners executed and thrown into the bogs, there are many bodies that they have found over the years, and now their gruesome deaths are on display for my amusement. It's amazing how well preserved the bodies were. The hands you feel you could hold right down to intact fingernails from bodies that were 1,000 years old. I only made it around the first floor of the museum as I had somewhat limited time, and I'm a nerd and interested in everything. Weirdly, they have a big exhibit on one of the upper floors to ancient Egypt. It's a permanent exhibit, as the Irish from 1890 to 1920 were digging up Egypt and shipping her heritage to Ireland. Over 2,000 pieces in the exhibit, which had me wobbling sort of on the idea of stealing another country's treasures. I'm supportive of world-class museums like the British Museum preserving World Heritage items. And really, the winged bulls of Sargon and they were made by the Arcadians from 4,500 years ago. Are they really the same as today's Iraqis? Was the Rosetta Stone being used as a peasant's wall discovered by the French 200 years ago along the Nile, having originated in Ptolemaic Egypt? Is it Greek, Egyptian, better served as a wall for a peasant? Having repositories of world heritage makes sense to me. But Irish adventurers digging up Egypt and shipping back pottery shards and mummies seem like they could be returned. Or at least Ireland could send some bog bodies to the Egyptian Museum. The third tour of the day was the Irish Mythology and Fairies tour. I met up with the girls in front of a pub, which is where the tour started, which, it being Ireland, seemed appropriate. I think it is somewhat weird that we learn so much about ancient Greek and Roman mythology, but nothing about Irish mythology. And in fact, there are 4 distinct periods of Irish mythology. All sorts of stories, from the salmon of knowledge to the leprechauns to the headless horsewoman, where clearly Ichabod Crane stole his story, and all sorts of shape-shifting creatures and banshees. Since about 9.5%, 30 million Americans are of Irish descent versus barely more than 1 million Greeks, it would seem way more practical to have our mythology be Irish instead of Greek. But what about the Romans, you say? Italian Americans are about half the population of Irish Americans. To answer your obvious questions, English Americans are the number one at about 20%, German Americans number 2 at about 12%, and Irish number 3. We have a lot of English mythology that we learn about in schools in America. Beowulf, King Arthur, Robin Hood, and of course all the Norse, which is basically English with the Angles and the Anglo-Saxon mythology with Odin, Thor, and the Valkyries. Even German folklore litters our lives. Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin, Hansel and Gretel, the Pied Piper. We are taught lots of mythology, but not one American in 1,000 could tell you the details of the salmon of knowledge. Even the unicorn, which is carved in marble on the National Bank and has images throughout Ireland, including being the signature song from the Irish Rovers, is Scottish. Yes, the unicorn, it turns out, is the national animal of Scotland. It is attached to Ireland for pretty much the same reason that the Scots own half of Ireland. English brought them over, gave them land and political power, and they used that to bully my ancestors and shove their national fake animal up our butts. Ugh, history. Anyway, the primary thing that I can remember from his tour is that the Irish call Ireland Ire. This name comes from their mythology. In ancient times, Ireland was ruled by the Tuatha, a race of superhumans and magical creatures. The Melicians, originally descendants of Noah, who then settled in Egypt, left at the time of Moses and settled in Spain. Their leader was Mila of Spain, Mil España, thus the Milicians. After Mila died, he left a prophecy that the Milicians should go to the fertile island to the north. The Milicians went and had three great battles with the Tuatha. Exhausted at the point, the Tuatha agreed to give the above ground land to the Milicians, and the Tuatha became the magic creatures underground. The fairies, leprechauns, monkeys, marrows, man-wolves, puka, and 30 other magical creatures that apparently are just not interesting enough for us to learn about in American school systems. The leaders in forging the peace agreement were three goddesses, Iriu, Banba, and Fatla. As a part of the settlement, they said the island had to be named after one of them. The Milicians said, sure, why not? So they named it after Iriu, or Erin as it was anglicized, Erin Isle. It is also the genesis of the popular girl's name, Erin. And in that phrase that everyone says on St. Patrick's Day, Erin go bra, which just means Ireland forever. Curiously, you can also call Ireland Banba or Fotla, which poets will do to help with rhyming schemes and to confuse their readers. So next time you're drinking green beer and shouting Erin go bra, remember the Tuatha goddesses, her battles with the children of Noah that settled in Egypt, the Irish archaeologists digging up ruins for apparently what is their heritage, the Spanish invasion, the magical creatures under the ground, and but for a little statistical quirk, you would be posting to Bonba land. Okay, said enough for today. Thanks for coming along. Talk to you again soon. Bye.